Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking a massive geopolitical puzzle. Turkey's behavior during the 2026 Iran war. Think about it. Why would a staunch NATO member suddenly prop up the Iranian state in the middle of a major conflict? On paper, it sounds entirely counterintuitive, right? But thanks to some really incredible definitive analysis by our lead researcher, Username, we're going to bypass all the political rhetoric. We're decoding the hard data, the economic realities, and the grand strategy that actually drove Ankara's decisions. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick roadmap of the journey we're taking through our lead researcher's data. We'll hit the 2026 strategic paradox, the geoeconomic shock, the power vacuum theory, the Erdogan-Trump intervention, and finally, regional power geometry. Section 1. The 2026 strategic paradox.
So what does this all mean? We're talking about two nations with literally centuries of rivalry. They fought proxy conflicts in places like Syria and Iraq for years. So why did Turkey support Iran in 2026? Well, it definitely wasn't ideological. It was a highly calculated, realist maneuver. Turkey's leadership knew for a fact that an Iranian collapse would trigger a massive domino effect, completely shattering the regional balance of power. Basically, they didn't want Iran to win big for sure, but they absolutely could not afford for the Iranian state to fail.
Section 2. The geoeconomic shock.
To really grasp why Ankara was sweating bullets over a potential Iranian collapse, you just have to look at the immediate economic bleeding when the war broke out in March 2026. On day one, the Borsa Istanbul plummeted by a massive 5.32%. Foreign investors totally panicked, and by May, the Turkish banking index had cratered by 24.23%. And the currency? It went into absolute freefall. To defend the lira from total collapse, our lead researcher found that the Turkish central bank was forced into a massive fire sale. They had to rapidly liquidate $22 billion in foreign government bonds in just the first few weeks. To put that into perspective, that is an unbelievable amount of capital to burn through just to keep the lights on. But wait, it gets crazier. It wasn't just foreign bonds. The central bank also burned through 127 tons of its gold reserves. That is the largest single reduction of gold reserves in Turkish history. The fallout from the war was literally draining the country's wealth overnight. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how clearly it maps out the brutal macroeconomic domino effect. The initial geopolitical shock sparked instant capital flight, and that compounded with violent spikes in energy prices. This put just unbearable pressure on the lira, totally blowing up Turkey's inflation targets. It pushed their 2026 forecast from 16% to a staggering 24%, with some estimates hitting 30%.
Section 3. The power vacuum theory. Okay, so while the economic bleeding was severe, the true existential threat was brewing right on Turkey's borders. In geopolitical terms, we call this the power vacuum theory. Essentially, it's the idea that if the central government in Tehran collapsed, it would create an ungoverned void. Ankara's ultimate nightmare was that this void would be swallowed up by transnational armed Kurdish networks, specifically PJAK and the PKK, forming heavily armed autonomous cantons right on their border.
Geographically speaking, this wasn't just about border security, it was about vital energy and trade lifelines. Roughly 13% of Turkey's natural gas comes straight from Iran. Plus, a chaotic, ungoverned border zone would completely paralyze Turkey's ambitious mega-projects, things like the development road through Iraq and the Middle Corridor. Their entire grand strategy of becoming the ultimate Eurasian energy hub would just be dead in the water.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark choice Ankara faced. On one hand, you have a stable Iranian state, a historical rival, yes, but predictable with governed borders. On the other hand, you have a fragmented border zone swarming with proxy groups and severed trade routes. When you look at it like that, preserving the Iranian state became the only rational choice for Turkey's survival.
Section 4. The Erdogan-Trump intervention.
Understanding that border threat really explains a crucial diplomatic pivot point. Let's walk through the timeline our lead researcher put together. In March 2026, the war breaks out. By April, there was highly credible intelligence indicating a U.S. and Israeli-backed ground invasion into Iran utilizing Kurdish proxy forces. Recognizing the existential danger there, early May saw a massive intervention. President Erdogan initiated a direct call with President Trump using classified intel, successfully lobbying to halt that ground invasion, which fundamentally altered the entire trajectory of the war.
Throughout this, Turkish leadership made their diplomatic posture crystal clear. To quote them directly, "The region faces a ring of fire."
Israel is dragging us into a disaster. Ankara was openly drawing a hard line against the maximalist military objectives of the US and Israel, basically refusing to quietly accept total regional destabilization.
Section 5. Regional Power Geometry. Zooming out to the grand chessboard here, we really have to look at Turkey's strategic paradigm, which is often called the Turkish century. Simply put, Turkey sees the world moving away from a single superpower. They want an active, independent seat at the table in a multipolar Middle East. Because of that, they actively resist a unipolar region dominated by US and Israeli hegemony, because in that setup, Turkey gets pushed aside into a secondary, submissive role. Let's move to and see how this builds, because you can actually map this out as a causal chain reaction. Step 1, an external attack weakens Iranian power. Step 2, this shatters the regional balance, creating a power vacuum that Israeli geopolitical influence expands to fill. Step 3, this results in new regional security arrangements built entirely without Turkey. And the end result? Turkey's maneuverability and geopolitical weight are severely limited.
So the crucial point is that Turkey's behavior in 2026 was just an absolute masterclass in realist statecraft and survival. Their grand strategy rested on 4 main pillars: maintain the regional power geometry, actively prevent an unipolar Middle East, leverage their NATO protection while acting entirely independently, and contain transnational Kurdish networks at all costs.
I want to give a massive thank you to our lead researcher, Username, for digging up this incredible data. We've seen exactly how Turkey navigated an almost impossible paradox, but I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If the 2026 Iran war proved that Turkey will prioritize regional stability over its traditional Western alliances, how will this bold precedent fundamentally reshape the next decade of Middle Eastern power dynamics? It's a massive question, and it's one that will absolutely define the future of geopolitics. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.